What is going on, guys? Welcome to week one recap of Hall Across the Country. This will be the first of our hopeful weekly recaps of the walk, also including any interviews we may or may not be able to get along the way with politicians and mental health providers, and people fighting the fight themselves. Going to start today's show off, or this week's episode off, with something a little bit more somber than what most. I mean, I guess the whole topic of mental health is a pretty mellow topic, but uh, leaving Greenfield, Indiana yesterday, I was able to take a few minutes and talk to the family of a young boy who, on May 5th, took his own life. This is Sammy Teisch. And I had heard about Sammy before the walk had begun. And, as I got closer to his hometown, it always kind of stuck in it kept kind of nagging at me like, what in the world goes through a 10-year-old's mind that makes them believe that that is the way out? And I had posted that I was coming into Greenfield, and somebody that had stumbled on the walk had told me that they had a tree out in front of the yard that Sammy said would grow really tall and be really strong and be able to hold a fort at one point. And so I went up, decided to visit the tree and kind of pay my respects. And Sammy's dad, Sam, was out talking on the phone, and I got a chance to, kind of talk about things with him and explain to him what I'm doing and what I'm doing it for. And I also offered, what little resources I had to potentially connect him with uh, people who have shared that same kind of shared trauma, that same shared struggle. Uh, just if he and his wife or anybody needed that kind of assistance. But one thing he really pushed for me to talk about and share, and you guys will see it popping up at the top of the page here. Um, this is the Sammy Teisch Bullying Act. Once they get to 10,000 signatures, his dad is ready to. He said he's told me I will walk it up to President Biden myself to get this put into play, because what had happened is Sammy had been bullied extensively over the last couple of years, and it got he said that it got to the point where the school was trying to say that Sammy was acting out, and his dad said, that's not Sammy, that's not who he is, and he was hiding. Hiding. A 10-year-old is hiding from his tormentors. That just doesn't ring well with me. That's where we're at as a society with kids and bullying these days. So if you get a chance, please click the link at the top of the screen. I'm going to leave it up over my logo for the rest of this episode, and let's make sure let's just blow the signature goal out of the water. But getting into the week one recap, as you guys know, for those of you that followed the first walk and have followed this one to begin with, we started on May 15th. That was the 2-year anniversary of the initial walk across the country, where I went east to west, raising money for behavioral health at Dayton Children's Hospital and advocating for mental health along the way, and kind of sharing stories with people. Uh, and we'll start off with day one, man. Day one was like anything that could go wrong did go wrong. I woke up at 5 o'clock so I could prep everything. I had to modify the tub that I bought for my cart. I had to cut some holes into it and secure it to my cart so I could put everything inside of it, and then loading everything properly. My goal was be out the door by 8 o'clock and let's be kicking it. And what it turned into was about 11:30. I finally got out the door in the rain. And, started off going fairly well. I mean, I don't mind walking in the rain. I actually enjoy it, um, especially in summertime. Obviously it cools you down. Um, so the rain really didn't bother me. There was no lightning. It was just kind of a dreary day. And, so I just trudged through Fairborn, kind of went up out of town, and got about 7 miles in. I stopped to grab lunch at Hothead Burrito. And, again, I'm 7 miles into the day. It's going a little bit slower than I thought it would, which wasn't entirely surprising. I mean, the first walk, if you haven't seen my pictures, I'm not going to hide it. I'm a big dude, all right? The first walk, I was probably 355 when I started that walk. This walk, if I had to guess, I was probably 380, 385 when I started. Um, without going super in depth to that story, a little over a year ago, last March, I had a hernia operation, which was, I hope, the last thing left over from the motorcycle accident. I had immediately developed a fatty hernia right after the accident, which apparently was common with like traumatic pelvic injuries. But because it was fatty, the doctors were like, there's no real need to do any surgery on it. So, a couple years go by. I do that first walk across the country. I come back. I'm back to work. And I sit down one day and I felt like I sit down at the lunch table, and right where my belt was at, I felt pain. So I went into the doctor. They set me up with a CT scan, and they found two spots they needed to repair. I'm like, no big deal. Two little spots. They tell me and my mom the surgery's going to take 2.5 hours. I'm like, cool. Yeah, I'm going to be out, so it doesn't really bother me. Well, I've come to from surgery, and I was out for 6 hours. Apparently, my entire abdominal wall was just completely trashed. Part of the ab, like your ab muscles, your rectus abdominis muscles, mine had apparently sheared off the bone from the accident. Never knew it. I couldn't really tell like a difference, but uh, so yeah, they ended up putting an 11 by 11 square panel of mesh in my abdominal wall to fix it. And, uh, I came out of surgery and my mom was gone. And when they did that, though, I was only out of work for 2 weeks. I was back to work as soon as I could. And those first 2 weeks, I didn't eat anything. And everybody looks at me, and I know what you're thinking. Like, this guy eats a ton. I really don't. The quality of food I eat is usually pretty trashy, but like I don't eat a high amount of food, especially while I'm doing this type of stuff. Like, there are a lot of times like I get to the end of the day and I'm just ready to go, like to sit down. Like, especially in a month or so when it starts to get real hot out, I don't even want to eat. It's hard to force myself to eat. Um, but like I wasn't eating very much at all after the hernia surgery. I didn't feel like it. For 3 or 4 days, I still had a catheter in, like walking around the house with it. Like I didn't, I felt miserable. Like I felt okay, but I just didn't feel like eating. But somehow, in the 2 to 3 weeks post operative, I gained like 20 to 25 pounds minimum. And uh, the doctors couldn't explain it. They did another CT scan and MRI, said there was a little bit of fluid left inside, but not enough for them to like drill back into my guts and put another drain in. They basically just implied that you're kind of a fat dude and you just need to work on your diet and whatnot. And I know how you gain and how you lose weight. Uh, every 3,500 pound or 3,500 calories of surplus is a pound of weight. So for 2 weeks, I would have had to have consumed hundreds of thousands of calories to gain that weight, and that's just not possible with what I was eating. But uh, and then when they cut me open, um, everything kind of like slid down. So like now I've got what my mom used to joke about uh, back in the day, having Dunlap's disease, where now my belly Dunlapped over my belt. So, it's like, mentally, I don't like to look at myself in the mirror, like even less than I used to before. But yeah, everything kind of slid down, and I really don't have a whole lot of like ab and core strength right now. So, like the first day, my lower back was just super tight walking, and I had to stop, every like half mile and try and stretch it out, and I was kind of doing like pelvic tilts and some of the stuff that they had me doing after the accident to kind of get loose and things like that. and I struggled the first day. Our goal was to get 20 miles and get to Inglewood, Ohio Fire Department. A good friend of mine, shout out to Adam Ansley, who has jumped on with Haul Across the Country as a volunteer. Um, he is president of his firefighter union, so he uses that as a way to kind of get our foot in the door with fire departments and try to help us out with getting safe places to camp. And it actually paid off on day two. He got a hold of Brookville, Ohio Fire Department, and they were super cool. They were like, forget putting up a tent. Like, we've got spare cots and everything. We'll make you a bed. And they cooked a delicious bourbon chicken dinner. And when I'm on the road and like doing the walks and whatnot, like eating hot food and eating real food is like one step below showers for me on like the fringe benefits, like the things I enjoy. Um, so, uh, I got a hold of Adam and I was like, man, you gotta tell Inglewood, like, I apologize, I'm not gonna make it. And I was kind of close to a different township fire department. I'm like, could you do me a favor? And this is late though. This is like 7 o'clock at night. And I'm like sitting out front of a Red Roof Inn that looked to be in a pretty sketchy part of town, but I was ready to book it just to like sit down and try to recover. And I told him, I'm like, hey, maybe you try this fire department because it was about another zero point 0.7 miles or so up the road. He's like, yeah, give me a second. And he's like, how far are you away? And I told him. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, that means he's probably got a hold of somebody. So I started walking, and I get to the UDF right around the corner. I go in, like, grab myself like a turkey sandwich and a couple of Gatorades, and I'm still waiting. And I'm still waiting. And he's like, man, he's like, I'm not hearing back. I'm like, okay. So I go like another mile and a half up the road, and I find a church there, and I throw my tent up there for the night. Thankfully, the police never came by and harassed me or anything. It's not like I was doing, anything criminal. I just sleeping for the night. Um, day two started. I felt like I had a decent night's rest. Like, it wasn't super hot that day, so I was like, yeah, we're gonna knock this day out. Let's go. Um, so I got up. I started hitting the road. I knew that my mom had picked up a couple of things that I forgot, like a hat, some sunscreen, and plastic cutlery so I could make my peanut butter and honey sandwiches and whatnot as I go. So she had ordered some of that stuff off Amazon, some of that stuff from Walmart. Was like, well, I'll just meet you since you're still relatively close. So I was like, well, why don't you meet me at Waffle House on Main Street in Dayton, Inglewood. I was like, we'll have like a brunch and I'll just pick all the stuff up then. And so I got there, and because I didn't eat any breakfast that morning, because again, I didn't have anything. Like, I guess I could have just dipped a hand in the peanut butter and then just like ate peanut butter out of my hand like a savage. Uh, but we met, had a little food there, and mom said her tearful goodbyes again, and started on the road from there to Brookville, and going uphill a little bit, and it started to get warmer because it was late in the day. But this is still at a point where my body's still kind of getting used to walking again and doing a lot of movement. Like, I was on my feet all day at work, but I wasn't walking all day at work. And obviously hindsight's 2020. Probably should have spent some time doing some physical preparation, but I didn't. I didn't do it for the first one either, and I turned out fine. So I knew that the pain and the struggles would hopefully, knock on wood, only last a few days. And so, I'm trudging through, and I start to go up one road that is like the last big road I got to go over. Bridge goes over I-70, and then I'm like a mile away from the fire department. And the bridge is out. And I'm like, well, I'm going to walk up there because maybe they're only working on half of the bridge, and maybe I can walk across half of it. So I go like another, quarter mile, third of a mile up, and get disappointed. I was like, well, now I got to turn around and backtrack all the way. So we backtrack around, and I finally get to Brookville. And man, they were super receptive. We talked about the first walk, talked about what I'm doing with the second walk, and like in the world of like, it's a small world after all. Talking to one of the firefighters because they were talking about the firefighters in Germantown and Farmersville, and I was like, oh, I know a woman who runs for Farmersville, and her dad's the chief down there, or was. I'm not sure if he still is. And they asked who it was, and he was like, oh, you know her? Like, I know her really well. So we FaceTimed her and surprised her. So that was like, wow, I'm in the middle, I'm in the cornfields, and here I am having like a 6 degrees of separation with somebody I already know. Um, but yeah, the guys were super cool. They're like, hey, if you want to do your laundry. And at that point, I had like 2 pairs of shorts, 2 shirts, a couple pairs of under, like 2 days worth of clothes. But they're like, go ahead and do it. Just make sure, refresh everything. I'm like, okay. So I do my laundry. Um, like I said, the bourbon chicken they had, like, I don't even think I've ever eaten bourbon chicken in my life, but I loved it. It was delicious. I even had like a couple pieces of cornbread, and I'm not a cornbread guy, but it's just everything was good. The company was great. The food was great. You know, Sleeping inside is cool on these walks, but it's not a must have for me. Only when I'm just completely physically beat up. Or need to record one of these episodes are really the only times I kind of need a hotel room. And as long as it's, not 85 degrees at night, I really don't mind sleeping outside. Throughout the first walk, I think I had some of my best night's sleep outside, especially in the fall and whatnot. Like once the weather calms down a little bit, getting out to Nebraska and further east, one of the best night's sleep I had was like I was in Nevada and the lows got into the teens, and I was in my tent in my sleeping bag, which was rated to 20 degrees. And I don't know, man, I'm a cold sleeper anyway. Like when I come in this hotel or any hotel, I go immediately to the air conditioner and I put that thing on as cold as it'll go. Because at the end of the night, when I'm ready to go to bed, I love to get under the covers and just get warm. Uh, it does well for my mind and body. Uh, but um, so yeah, sleeping outside is like it's just I prefer it. I honestly my body felt better all the time sleeping outside as opposed to inside. Um, but then again, it's also nice to get a shower every now and then. It's another one of the things that you really miss when you're doing something as crazy as this is the ability to be completely clean rather than just using baby wipes and dude wipes on the essentials and moving forward. Gets to feel a bit grimy. But I woke up the next day on day 3 and I'm like, man, I feel pretty good, man. Let's go get this. A couple storms moved through, so I ended up having to wait like another 2 or 3 hours. Because again, don't mind walking in the rain, but when there's thunder and lightning, I'm pushing 100 pounds worth of gear in a mobile lightning rod, and I don't want to die. So I try to avoid the storms as much as possible. So I waited for about 30 minutes after the last recorded lightning strike. Cause I have a couple apps on my phone that'll be like, hey, lightning strike within 10 miles, wait 30 minutes before it'll let me know and show me kind of where the lightning strikes are. So I finally get going, and it's like, I start off feeling really well. It's still kind of raining, but I have my raincoat on, and I'm like, and I get about a mile to the other side of Brookville. I had stopped and had breakfast at Rob's Catering, which had some phenomenal servers. Like it's like a old school buffet style restaurant, and I had a bunch of eggs and potatoes and some French toast or whatnot. Server was amazing. Like all the people, you could tell like pretty much everybody in there is a regular, and it's just one of those cool vibes. Those cool like small town vibes. I love those. That was one of my favorite parts on the first walk too. Is I went through a few bigger cities and whatnot, but like for me, like some of the best reception I received was from people in small town America because I grew up in small town America. So I like when you're a kid, you're like, man, I can't wait to get out of this town, and like I got out of it, and I'm like, man, I miss small town America. Um, but so I left there, and I got like 100 feet out the door, and was getting ready to hit the road towards what would have been Richmond, and there was just like overall my body and I guess part of my brain, like I just wasn't like I was excited, but there was just something going on where I didn't feel 100%, and I didn't feel 50%. And a friend was like, they had offered, hey, we'll get you we want to get you a hotel room one night and food one night. You just let us know. And I was like, I messaged them and I was like, hey guys, I gotta unfortunately have to call in that favor. And they're like, no sweat. So I literally walked a mile across Brookville and stayed in a hotel that night on day 3. And I literally just laid in the bed, drank water and Gatorade, and just tried to see if it was like dehydration. I just couldn't put my finger on it. Get up the next day and start heading out. There was a nice little recreational trail leading out to Route 40 right by the hotel. So I took that for a nice little like morning detour, or morning start to my day. And right at the intersection of that trail and 40, I met up with Ben, my former coworker. I've known Ben now for close to 11 years, and super solid guy. Love the guy to death. And we got pretty close as far as friends when we started working together. Because for the first 8 or 9 years that I worked in that warehouse, I worked for their contracting company. Go on my first walk, come back. Meyer themselves hired me to do quality assurance. So like Ben and I were officially coworkers, and like I love Ben to death. But he brought me uh, two airless tubes for my bigger tires, just because that takes away one stress, knowing that you can't deflate the tires because they're like foam rubber, so they'll be fine. And he brought a bunch of Gatorades and snacks and stuff, and we sat there and talked. And before and it was probably half hour, 45 minutes. I'm 3 days into this walk, and I'm already like, when I get a chance to talk to somebody, I'm like, we sit there and we talk about it and how work's going now that the greatest quality assurance person that Meyer has ever had has left the building. And right before I leave, Ben's like, well, do you mind if I pray for you? And I said, absolutely not. I said, anytime on the first walk that somebody wanted to pray for me, I was 100% open to it. I was raised in the church. Most people will tell you that maybe I don't live the most Christ-like life. I don't go to church, but I try to like do the right thing as much as possible. I just try to be a decent person. And but on the first walk, and I've told this story to anybody that anytime this comes up in conversation, but on the first walk, and I know there are people out there that think religion's a scam and all that, and that's fine. We're all, it's the beauty of America. We're all entitled to our beliefs. I just had way too many experiences on the first walk that were evidence that there was somebody that was watching out for me. Um, Case in point, one time in Iowa, I had just gotten off the phone with a TV station that wanted to do an interview with me and wanted to get a time frame of when I would be, in X town. So I told them, but at the same time, I had just got done looking at my front wheel on the stroller I had for that first walk. And I was like, man, I really need to get a pair of vice grips so I can keep these bolts tightened as I go to make sure my wheels stay straight. It's like, well, you know what? When I get into this town, I'll pick up a pair of vice grips. So I head up the road, and I'm telling you guys, I don't even walk like 500 feet. There's a small pair of rusty vice grips on the ground. Not rusted that they don't work. They're just rusty. That's just it, Yeah, you could always just explain it away as something completely random, but I didn't. There are plenty other instances I could talk about where it was like right place, right time. How does this happen if you're not being guided by something else, something bigger than yourself? Um, Later on in Iowa, I was in a little town called Norman, and I mean, this town probably, if it had 400 people, I'd be surprised. You know, and I got permission from the sheriffs in the area to throw my tent up at the baseball diamond, which one thing I didn't know about in Iowa, which was really cool that I found out at the time, was they have like these traveling semi-pro ball teams that are usually like college age guys or whatnot. Because I was sitting out there watching this game, and I'm like, man, these guys are way too old to be high schoolers. Like they have like builds and beards like I've got. So I eventually find out that that's what that was. I thought that was a really cool thing. Like each little town had their own baseball team. It was kind of a cool little thing. But as I come into this town, like I'm I'm looking at Google Maps. I'm like, okay, well I gotta turn here, gotta turn here. So I turn, make a wrong turn. I'm going up this hill to go towards the ball diamond. There's a bunch of people outside having a pool party, and they're doing what Iowans claim they do best, and that is drink Busch Light. From what they told me, the state of Iowa consumes more Busch Light than any other state in the country. And but so we were all talking, and they asked what I was doing and what all the we're like, what's that thing you're pushing around? So we get to talking, and I told them about the cart. I told them about how I'm walking across the country for mental health and suicide prevention, and how my friend's son uh, took his life at 16. And it turned out that the homeowner there had lost her son to suicide a few years prior to that. If I don't take that random wrong turn, I don't meet those people. You won't be able to convince me that there's not some type of higher power that has some type of influence uh, in things from time to time. So, but yeah, Ben prays for me, and I'm telling you guys, like, whatever, like, inner thing that was kind of slowing me down disappeared. Like, yeah, in the days since, like, yeah, I get my aches and pains. Like, my left pinky toe right now is like a piece of hamburger meat. It blistered up it registered that it was blistering, and I didn't really cover it because I was like, oh, it'll be fine. And then it was not fine, and it ended up getting less and less fine. So, like, the original skin blistered and is like peeled, and like now the skin underneath is even blistering. But like once I get walking, after like 10 steps, it doesn't hurt, so I don't really, out of sight, out of mind, right? But but yeah, like there was whatever that thing was that was like inside me that was like kind of dragging me down and making me feel awful was gone, and I haven't had that since. Knock on wood. And yeah, so I finished that walk. It was the farthest walk or furthest mileage to date for the walk. I think we got 21.7 miles to get to Richmond. I grabbed a room at the Motel 6 there. And then as I'm checking in, the lady at the front desk is like, "Wow, you got a lot of stuff there. That's a setup." And I said, "Yeah." I was like, "This is everything I need to walk across the country." And she's like, "Why are you walking?" So I tell her, I'm walking for mental health awareness and suicide prevention. And she was telling me about how both of her children, they themselves were bullied in school, have their issues with depression. Uh, One of her daughters, she said, has battled addiction and homelessness. And, um, that when people share those stories with me, it's like, it's hard. And it's something I'm going to have to get over because this is the type of stuff I really want to capture and put out for people. Um, but those are the stories I want to hear and I want to tell. I want to hear that people are fighting those demons every day and they're beating them, and they're still going, because you don't know. You know, I could share Bob Smith's story about how you know he was depressed and he beats it by doing X, Y, and Z, and somebody 1,000 miles away could hear that story and be like, "Man, that's kind of the same thing I'm going through. I can get through this. I'm gonna make a plan. I'm gonna find out how to beat this, or at least put myself on a level playing field with it." And she's like, "Oh, I think it's great what you're doing, and I hope you have a safe trip." And I said, "I cannot guarantee that I will be safe because at some point I will do something stupid. It's inevitable." Uh, so left Richmond and headed towards real small town Centerville, Indiana. And man, again, it was another one of those just like super cool small town. Like, it was awesome. It's just like a neat little town. Their fire department had gotten back in touch with me and given me permission to throw up a tent on their property, which was cool. They said, "Hey, we're a volunteer department, so there's no guarantee somebody will be there. But if you need anything, just holler at us, and we'll find a way to help out." But on the way into town, I stopped at a little like restaurant brewery called Five Arch, and um, tried to get like the cleanest thing I could get. Like, I got pretzel bites with like honey mustard. And let me tell you, if you know me, I don't do mustard. I hate mustard. The smell of mustard makes me nauseous. But because I had been cramping up a little bit over the last couple days, I was like, you know what? Any type of little mustard will help kind of relieve those cramps. So I was like, instead of using the cheese, I used the honey mustard. And the honey made it like somewhat tolerable. I'm just not a mustard guy. Had nothing to do with the quality of the food. Um, and then I think I got like grilled chicken. Like, the food was excellent. I tried one of their in-house lagers. Not a big drinker, but if I go to a place like that, every now and then I'll have like a beer of a local brewery just to kind of try it out. And one thing that Five Arch did that I thought was really awesome is they give you a little wooden nickel, and it may not seem like much, but like 5 cents off of every drink order, they give you this wooden nickel, and on your way out, they have this uh, collection of like little coin drop things, and there were 4 or 5 nonprofits that help their local community, and you get to pick where your money goes. And I thought that was awesome. I was like, that's cool. Yeah, it may not, everybody thinks like, oh, it's just a nickel. Like, yeah, you know what? A few nickels every day, every week, every month, that adds up. That was awesome. I thought it was a cool little thing to do. Got my tent set up, and one of the cadets for Centerville Fire he came by because apparently they sent a 911 page out, so the police, the sheriffs, like everybody knew I was there and I had permission to be there. But they gave me a tour of the station. I sat down. We were talking, me, him, and one of their captains. Talked about mental health, talked about firefighting, which is something that and maybe it's because I spent most of my time on these walks spending, with firefighters. I have a ton of friends that are firefighters. I just respect the hell out of them. I respect the hell out of all the first responders, but like, you know, firemen, for whatever reason, it resonates with me more. It could be that that's what I was on my way to class for my EMT and firefighter stuff when I evil Knieveled myself off my motorcycle in 2020. But, you know, it's just nice to have that conversation with those type of guys. Not that any of the police have been bad, because Centerville Police Officer Hale stopped and we talked. Awesome dude. He was like, if you need anything, let me know. And at one point in the middle of the night, I heard like kids at the school building, and I was like, I just happened to be awake, and I knew he was on shift all night. So I was like, hey, pretty sure there's kids at the school or people at the school. I can hear them. I don't know if they're doing anything, but they're there. And I mean, like, boom, a couple minutes later, he came rolling in. He got him out of there. So I wake up the next morning, and I go grab, there's a little, like, I think it was Auntie M's Farm Fresh Pies. And I was like, heck yeah, man. Like, I'm going to start my day with some apple pie. Walked in, and I was like, oh, they didn't have any apple pie ready. Because I went in there, like, right when they opened. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I'll try one of the Snickers pie. Oh, we don't have any slices ready of that. Ugh. She's like, well, we do have Oreo pie. And I was like, okay. So I tried an Oreo pie. And even though I don't like to do caffeine when I'm doing this, because I typically dehydrate myself way more than I need to just naturally, I grabbed a lavender and white chocolate, like, iced latte. Oh, so good. It was so good. So I had that, like a nice little peppy start to the day. Luckily, they had a public restroom in the park, so I was able to kind of get cleaned up a little bit and get the day going. And as I'm leaving, I look out and I see like road construction happening, and I was like, oh no. And I asked because they had moved all the lanes over, so I normally walk facing traffic, and now there's like no shoulder because they've shifted everything while they're blacktopping. And I'm like, crap. So I saw one of the construction workers, and I, jogged across the road, and I was like, hey, how far up does this go? And he goes, oh, about 9 miles up to Cambridge City, where I was planning to have lunch that day. And I was like, oh, sweet. It's like, well, this is going to be dangerous. And he's like, nah. He's like, just go ahead and walk up this side. He's like, you got two sets of barrels to kind of protect you. And he's like, we're not really doing much until you get further up. And even then, we're not going to be in the area where you're walking. So I said, count it. So I had like a, 15-foot wide lane all to myself for that morning, which was really nice. But yeah, I got to Cambridge City. Lumpy's Cafe donated lunch that day. I destroyed some grilled chicken and like a half gallon of lemonade and about a gallon of water. They also filled up my water jug for me before I left. Continued on that day, did like about 19 or so miles to Louisville Park, where I got to meet Tom Saunders. He's a former senator, I believe, congressman, and he's held a lot of different public offices in Indiana, and he's on the the town council there in Louisville, but he met me at the park and just wanted to say hi. Dropped off a copy of his book. He said if I wanted something to help put me to sleep every night, I was more than welcome to give that a read. Super nice guy. He's like, "Is there anything we can do for you?" And I was like, "Are there public bathrooms here?" And he's like, "No." It's like made it a little bit rough, but yeah, nice little park. I set up underneath their gazebo. If I'm ever in a park camp, and I always set up under the gazebo, especially in summertime or when it's getting warm, because you never know when the humidity is going to hit, and then boom, a pop up rainstorm. So had a pretty decent night's sleep. Not great. It was still kind of warm out. It was like 70 degrees at night. Like it needs to be like 65 or less before I'm comfortable sleeping outside. I'll nod off every couple hours when it's warmer, but when I'm laying down and it's that warm outside, like even like shifting around, it makes me sweat. Like not in my sleeping bag, like not with nothing on, just laying there. I'm just like, but so I got up, started hitting the road to Greenfield, excuse me, and this day, this was 2 days ago, man, it was hot. As I came into Greenfield, I remember turning around and looking at a digital sign from one of the businesses out there. This is 6:30 at night. It was 91 degrees in May at 6:30 in the evening. Someone explain it to me. But yeah, I was super dehydrated. I had smashed through like almost all the liquid I had. And along the way, like Becca McDonald stopped. She had stopped the day before as well because she thought I was homeless, which is a fair perception when you look at me and the things I'm carrying. But she dropped off some waters and like $20 and was like, "Hey, grab some food with this and whatnot." And I told her what I was walking for, and she was like, "Oh, really?" So yeah, she met me again as I was leaving Louisville, going towards Greenfield. Dropped off a bunch more drinks, and wished me the best of luck on my trip. And so I headed out, and then I stopped, take a break about 4.5 miles in Dunreath, right outside the post office and fire station. There's a nice little tree with some shade. So I popped my chair out, sat down, and Susie, who is the sister of one of the people who follows the walk on Facebook, she was going to go buy me some supplies, but she didn't have time because I got to the town too fast. And I explained, I was like, when it's going to be hot out, I try to get a start as early as I can because I know, once that heat hits, my pace will slow down to a crawl. But she gave me a hug. Like she put me on FaceTime with her neighbor. Because they both appreciate. They said they both appreciated what I'm doing, and it helped. And then as I was going further down the road, I met up with another. There was another gentleman who passed me once, and he turned around and came back by, and he asked me, he's like, "You want a ride?" And I was like, "I would love a ride. However," I was like, "I can't take one." Explain to him, "Hey, I'm walking across the country," and he was like, "Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure because you were you look like you were having a time." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's about the best way to put it." But he had all of his little blue healers, and if you know anything about me from the first walk, you know that if it's pettable, I want to pet it. I love petting animals. I love all the animals, and I haven't had a whole lot of luck. Had a lot of horses that would come up to fences and tease me with letting me pet them and then run away. I don't like that. And no cows will ever let me pet them. Maybe it's because we're the same size, but they just run from me. But so I pet all four of his blue healers while we're talking, and he gave me some tips about Greenfield as I was coming into town, and he wished me well. And then a little bit further up the road, I come in, and Jeremy Paro, he stops, and he's like, "Man," he's like, I saw you earlier when I was going to work, and you're still on the road when I'm coming home from work." So we got to talking, and I explained what I was doing, and he was like, "Dude, that is awesome." He's like, "Well, here's my card. I'm like the first set of houses as you come into Greenfield." He's like, "Come by." He's like, "I'll have a bunch of drinks, or I'll have some stuff out on the porch for you." And I was like, "Awesome." Uh, and then he told me that the place I ended up stopping for dinner that night, Tour of Italy, he's like, "It's a great place." I stopped in. He left like an Under Armour jug full of water and a bunch of snacks with a note that was like, "Good luck on your walk. If you need anything, you've got my number. Don't hesitate to call." I keep that note. Uh, I keep all those kind of like personal things in special spots. Actually, that note's in my wallet. Um, the Sammy funeral card that his dad gave me, that stays with the solar panel because that is the place that it's less likely to get bent with all of my junk. And like earlier on, you guys saw in one of my other videos, if you follow the TikTok or the other socials, I have my Barkley bag that I got from an ultra marathon that I failed miserably on last year. But there's a pocket on that where I keep the challenge coin that the Brookville Fire Department gave me, a set of dog tags that my mom and sister had made up with like my name and their phone numbers on it for whatever reason, in case somebody were to find me, you know, passed out along the side of the road or whatnot. And then I also keep my friend Joe Hobbs's son, Liam, the turkey trot half marathon medal that he got. He lost Liam, uh, I believe it was in 21. Uh, and he was only 16 or 17 at the time. He had, I believe it was cerebral palsy, and eventually he passed away from the complications from that, I do believe. But Liam was a great kid. And, on the first walk, Joe gave me that medal, and he said, anytime things get tough, you just remember you got this medal, and then remember that Liam's, he's going with you. And, I told Joe when I put it in my pack, or, my gear supplies for the walk, I said, "I'm taking Liam with me again." And he was like, "I really appreciate that." But the last thing that happened in Greenfield, which was like, I didn't think was going to happen, and it was so awesome that it did, is as I'm on my way, I get an email. I happen to check my email, and I get something from Jim Johnson, who is a uh, assistant to Senator Michael Crider here in Indiana. And Michael Crider is somebody that I reached out to before this walk even started, knowing that I was coming to Indiana first, because, like I said before, we've wanted to set up this mobile podcast, and I wanted to be able to sit down with people and talk about mental health and talk about what they're doing to improve mental health. And when I was like researching who I wanted to speak to as I came into Indiana as far as legislators, I Googled like Indiana legislators and mental health, and his was the first name that came up. And I read, about Senate Enabled Act 1, I believe is what it was called. But essentially, his bill is combining the 988 service with their community behavioral and mental health services with their first responders and putting these all together to work collaboratively. They're also trying to put hundreds of millions of dollars into encouraging more people to go into the field, which is a huge need that we have out there. And that was one thing that I found. I mean, I found this issue at home, but you also saw it as I walked across the country. I mean, putting it into perspective like this, months ago, I went to my doctor and explained to him, I was like, I really believe that and at the time, I'd never looked up like ADHD or anything like that, but I started to get like ads for it. And somebody joked, they were like, well, do you scroll a lot on TikTok or do you scroll a lot? I'm like, well, yeah, I think we all do. But I started looking at some of the symptoms of ADHD, and I had a high portion of them. So I was like, I just want to, what do I have to do to go get tested so I can try to fix things? And he's like, well, I'll get you this referral. I'll get a referral written up to this clinic here, and they'll get you set up for testing, which apparently was like a long list of questions, like one of those things where I think they ask you like the same question multiple different ways, uh, kind of like how jobs sometimes do. But I called this place, and I believe it was like January, February, and they were like, I told them what I needed, and they were like, okay, yeah, well, we are booking out into May. And I was like, y'all are booking out into May for me to sit down and take a test? I was like, well, no, thank you. I'm going to be gone at that point. So, it'll just be one of those things that I learn to live with, and until I get done with this and get settled down back home and kind of figure it out. Um, but yeah, like that many months out just to take a test, you know, and That's nothing to say about uh, how medical insurance doesn't treat mental health like it's legitimate. They don't pay very much. You have to wait months to get in to see somebody. There's a lot of holes in it right now, and Senator Kreider is doing a lot for people in the Hoosier state to plug those holes. So, um, Hoosier people, Hoosiers, Hoosierites, Indianans, you know, trust that there are people in your government that are doing positive things for mental health, that are trying to do the best they can to improve the mental health services in your state. Because I know that that's a big thing, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to talk to legislators is to kind of put their uh, you know what they're doing out there for people, because not everybody knows. I asked a couple of people that I talked to if they knew that Senator Kreider had put that bill out, and there were people that were like, I had no idea. So we want people to know that, yeah, there is hope. Like, there are politicians out there that are doing things to help. And the one thing that really stuck with me about Senator Kreider is, he goes, if you ask people around here, like around the state building, which I'll get to later today, he goes, if you ask a lot of people around there, and he's like, regardless of party, he's like, what they think about Michael Kreider, they would say that he doesn't really give a crap about politics. He cares about policy. He's trying to make change, and I feel like we've got far too few politicians that are actively trying to do that. So, props to Senator Kreider and the work he is doing. I thank you for it. As somebody who goes through it, not necessarily in this state, but somebody who's been through it, knowing that there are people like you out there that are actively trying to change things, you have all of my respect, sir. Uh, so yeah, late yesterday, I left Greenfield. As I was going out, though, I stopped and talked to Sam Teich, and I dropped off one of my walking shirts at Sammy's tree. Uh, it was the only thing I really had with me that I could leave at the tree to kind of pay respects. Uh, it's not a big deal. I think it takes me down. Like, it's not a big deal for me because I have other shirts. I think I've still got 6 or 7. So all it does is just mean I do laundry one day earlier, or Febreze a shirt once to rewear it until I do laundry. It's not a, it felt like the right thing to leave there, as far as us at Haul Across the Country showing our support. And then obviously looking up top, sharing the change.org petition for Sam. And let's get that, let's do everything we can to get that bill into Washington and get it passed, because we got to do something. And it's not just a thing here in here in Indiana. It happens everywhere. Bullying has become so bad nowadays. And a lot of times it's the parents. Parents are oblivious to how their children act at school. Schools can be slow to act when bullying is reported, and it's an entire mess. And we just have to do better. There is no there is no world, there is no logical place that you'll ever convince me where a 10-year-old, a 16-year-old is at the point where taking their own life is the only option. We got to do better. But last night, after I talked to Sam, kind of hit the road towards Indy, and we covered about 13 miles. I'm on the east end of Indy today, recording this at the 465 loop, and um, it was a relatively easy walk. I mean, I wasn't really pushing it because I knew I had time. We had tried to reach out to a couple hotels to see if they would donate a room. Um, it's Indy 500 weekend, so I understand that nobody wants to donate. It's a big weekend for this area, for the state, for the city. So it is what it is. We couldn't get a hold of Indianapolis Fire. We're hoping to do that for today as I head out, hoping to get permission to camp out at one of the stations on the south end of town as I head out after I go visit the state capitol. But no, it was a very rough start to this. I was in a lot of pain, mentally. I don't even know if I want to say mentally. Just, you know, there still is considerable physical pain. There's going to be. That's the way this walk is. And, you know, people are like, oh, it's just walking. It can't be that painful. Well, I have a lot of metal inside me, and I'm also pushing 100 pounds of gear everywhere I go. So no matter what, it's still heavy. It's still a load to carry. Um, but yeah, weird that like uh, once I had been prayed for, things felt like they were changing for the better. And I'll just leave that there. Whether people want to believe it was psychosomatic or it really was the way things are, I'm still going to put it out there that I believe that it helped because I'm the one that's experiencing this. And I can tell you that I felt different from that moment on. Uh, Before we wrap this up, I do want to give a shout out to everybody that has donated at haulacrossthecountry.com uh, because that is the only way this walk finishes. Straight up, flat out, is donations. We, myself and the board members, really kind of hoped there would be more like businesses and corporate sponsors, people willing to jump in on this. And maybe right now, maybe it's not super marketable, and that causes them hesitation. That could be it. Who am I to judge? I'm not a great business mind. Um, I never really wanted to fund it with like donations from the average Joe. I know money is tight. The dollar does not go as far as it used to. So when people donate their money to me, it means more. And these are just the people that have donated online that I want to give the thanks to. There are more people that have donated in person. Like I said, uh, Becca. There was a gentleman whose name escapes me, who prayed for me also in Greenfield, who donated $20. Um, Jessica, I believe, was my server yesterday at Mozzie's, where I had lunch. She gave me a $50 bill and said she was going to donate more. But as far as the people that have donated to Haul Across the Country on the website, they are the names that I have. So I want to say thank you to Timothy Duffy. He was the first person to donate. He found out about the walk from one of my recap posts on 11 Warriors, an Ohio State message board. Um, Ashley Canny and Luke Harbage. Ashley runs a nonprofit in Columbus, Ohio called Feed the Kids Columbus. She has been a godsend as a guide or a mentor as I try to venture into this world of nonprofit work. Luke Harbage was one of my teammates in high school. He and his brother were giant people in a world of average size high schoolers, and super great guys. And I really appreciate Luke and his donation. Josh Akers, my college wrestling teammate. Maybe we were just a little too close. Love the guy. I was best man at his wedding. One of the best guys I know. Thank you, Josh, for your donation. Paul Syme. Well, Syme was one of the guys who helped me get into coaching wrestling years ago when I helped him as an assist. He and I were both assistant coaches at Oakwood High School. Kimberly Park, who I know has followed the walk from the first time. Thank you for your donation. Veronica Legg, God, we have known each other for probably 15 years. And she jumped in. She was wanting to buy a shirt, but the t-shirt sales ended the day before the walk. So she just went ahead and donated cash outright. Karen Davis. Karen is Jackson's grandmother. Jackson is the young man that we walked for the first time, who took his own life in 2020 at 16 years old. Um, Karen has been a great supporter of Haul Across the Country and everything I've tried to do from the beginning. And I can't thank her enough. And last but not least is Carlene Eben. I don't know how Carlene's last name is pronounced, but she was our most recent donor. She sent me a message and let me know that she was going to donate. Um, but to anybody out there, please understand that all of the donations are greatly appreciated. The water and the Gatorades that people drop off, they mean more than you realize. Especially when it's warm out. A cold drink goes a long way. Um, but as I stated earlier, this walk doesn't happen without you guys. I've put money back to cover my bills as far as like cell phone and things like that back home. Like I've drained all my accounts to make sure that stuff is covered. Um, the only thing that we're covering on the walk is gear, which shouldn't. Most of my camping gear and stuff should be fairly durable. I'm not really worried about losing a lot of that. Uh, Shoes, which we're hoping that as we go, we can talk to running stores and maybe they'll be willing to donate a pair as we go, so we can kind of just refill inventory as the walk continues. Um, but yeah, the majority cost driver for this is food, you know. And I know, you know, I always joke about my weight and about my appearance. I'm a big dude, but I don't eat like you would think a big dude eats. I don't eat that much, and especially once I'm moving, like I tend to just want to get A to B as fast as possible. I might only sit down and eat like one actual meal a day, like in a place, but you know, the food is the big cost driver for this because shoes last about a month or so, maybe more, just maybe more, maybe a little less. Um, and the hotel stays, you know, the only time I really kind of need to is when I want to shoot these recap episodes and utilize the Wi-Fi, or, you know, if I got a chance to sit down and interview someone where I need to actually get cleaned up and change clothes, I have to be in a hotel to do that a little bit more efficiently. Um, but you know, everything you guys do to help out is greatly appreciated, and I'll never be able to thank you enough. You know, and I don't want people to, you know, cripple themselves financially for a week or a month to donate. So if you can't donate, don't worry about donating. But if you can, I'm not going to tell you not to. Um, I would love it if people out there could refer some businesses to me. I know on our first walk, uh, and he already told me, he's like, man, I can't do this the second time because you're going way too far. But on my first walk, there was a Domino's Pizza in my little hometown, and the manager, Ben, said, at the end of every month, let me know how many miles you walked, and I'll PayPal you, I'll Venmo you uh, $1 for every mile you walked, which was huge. So if you guys know of any business owners out there that you think would go well with what we're trying to do, or would just be interested in sponsoring, like send them to our website, www.haulacrossthecountry.com. Um, have them email me, haulacrossthecountry@gmail.com, or if you follow us on any of the socials, send me their info and I'll do my best to try to talk to them. I am a terrible salesman and I can't guarantee how well it's going to work, but I'll do my best. Um, but in closing, please, whatever you guys do, go to the link up top, sign the petition. Let's get this bill going. Let's help Sam's parents move through this unthinkable situation they're going through and use it to do something positive going forward. So I love you guys. Have a great day. We'll see you in a week. All right. I love you. Just remember, you are enough. You do matter. And at the very least, just get to the end of today. Go to sleep, wake up, do it tomorrow. Get to the end of the day tomorrow. Keep doing that. And eventually it'll get better. I promise. I love you guys.